happiest day of my life shattered into the cruelest betrayal within minutes. I had just finished paying off the mortgage on the little house where I had raised my daughter, Joy. 7 years of waking up at 4 juggling 2 jobs, scrubbing floors until my hands cracked, and caring for patients at the nursing home had finally led to freedom. I should have been celebrating with the 2 people I called family. Instead, my unemployed son-in-law sneered. "Great. Now go live in the dump." And my own daughter looked me in the eye and said, "You're a burden." Mom, I never imagined 5 words could bring them to their knees, but they did. For most of my 64 years, sacrifice had been my daily language. When Joy was born, her father had already passed away in a car accident. From then on, it was just the 2 of us, scraping by in our small home on Maple Street. I worked in diners, cleaned offices, and later spent my days at Sunset Manor, lifting patients, emptying bedpans, and doing whatever it took to keep us afloat. Joy was my reason for everything. Every late-night shift, every ache in my back, every meal skipped so she could have brand-name sneakers or a decorated cake on her birthday, it was all for her. I still remember her beaming face at 16 when I surprised her with a used Honda Civic. I had saved for months, eating peanut butter sandwiches and living on instant noodles, just to afford the down payment. She cried that day and called me the best mom in the world. For a long time, I believed her. But the girl who once held my hand on the first day of school turned into a woman I barely recognized. Joy met Tyson in college. He studied business management, though I rarely saw him crack open a textbook. He seemed more interested in video games and excuses than ambition. But Joy loved him, and I wanted to trust her choice. They married right after graduation in our backyard under the old oak tree. Money was too tight for a big ceremony, but Joy said she didn't care, she just wanted to marry him. That backyard wedding felt like a promise of new beginnings. Instead, it was the start of years of slow decline. They moved into my home just until we get on our feet. Joy had promised. That was 5 years ago. At first, Tyson went to job interviews and talked about plans, but soon, excuses replaced effort. He was always too qualified or not willing to waste his degree. Meanwhile, Joy worked part-time at a boutique, her paycheck barely covering her own expenses. Suddenly, I was supporting 3 adults instead of 2. Grocery bills doubled, the mortgage crept behind, and my exhaustion grew heavier. I could have asked them to contribute. Instead, I pushed myself harder, taking on weekend cleaning jobs in wealthy neighborhoods across town. I scrubbed strangers' toilets and polished their marble countertops while my daughter and her husband sat comfortably at home. Each time my body ached from overwork, I reminded myself this is for family, for our future. But slowly, family stopped feeling like family. Tyson's smirk whenever he stretched out on my couch without a care made my stomach turn. Joy's tone, once warm and grateful, shifted into something colder, dismissive, almost entitled. They stopped asking if I was tired, stopped noticing the sacrifices. To them, my endless labor had become invisible, expected. When the bank's letter arrived, confirming the house was finally mine, I was trembling with pride. I waved it in front of them like a trophy, expecting at least a smile. Tyson smirked and claimed it as our house. Joy muttered a flat, "That's nice," and went back to her coffee. And then they delivered their verdict, Tyson telling me to move out, Joy calling me a burden. I stood frozen, gripping the counter so I wouldn't collapse. All the nights I'd worked while they slept, all the years I'd held everything together, reduced to disposable trash in my own home. They rinsed coffee cups and flipped on the TV as if my heart hadn't just been torn apart. But that night, as I sat surrounded by old photo albums, grief gave way to something else. Cold clarity, determination. They thought I was powerless. They thought they could erase me from the very house I had built with sweat and sacrifice. What they didn't know was that this home, every deed, every tax record, every scrap of ownership was mine, and mine alone. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, folder in hand, as they shuffled out of bed close to noon. Their casual complaints about groceries and cereal turned into wide-eyed silence when I laid the documents in front of them. "The house is in my name," I said, "only my name." Tyson laughed nervously, thinking it was a detail, not a declaration. Joy stammered, "But I'm your only daughter. I inherit everything." And that was when I told them the truth that inheritance is not automatic, that I could leave everything to anyone I chose. Their faces drained of color. Their carefully built future was collapsing. "You wouldn't," Tyson muttered. "You wouldn't do that to your own daughter." I looked at Joy, the same girl who once whispered, "Thank you for everything," Mom at her graduation, now the woman who had agreed to send me to the dump. And I answered honestly, yesterday, I would have said no. Yesterday, I would have believed you. But yesterday, you called me a burden. Today, I'm not sure what I wouldn't do. The silence that followed was thicker than grief. For the first time in years, they realized I wasn't the helpless, aging woman they thought they could manipulate. I was their reckoning. Tyson was the first to recover his voice, pacing between the sink and the couch with a jittery energy that had nothing to do with caffeine. "You can't just change the rules. Lucille," he said, waving a hand at the papers as if they were party decorations. "We've been making plans." Joy stared at the deeds, lips parted, as if the neat blocks of type could rearrange themselves to give her the answer she wanted. I stacked the documents quietly, slid them back into the folder, and folded my hands. "The rules haven't changed," I said. "You were simply pretending there weren't any. This is my home. I paid for it. I decide what happens in it." Joy's eyes filled, not with the crocodile tears I had seen when she wanted something, but with the shocked tears of someone meeting a version of her mother she had never bothered to know. "Mom," she whispered, "we were only trying to think about the future." "You were thinking about yours," I replied. "Not mine." We argued in circles until nearly 1 p. the clock ticking loud as a metronome against the wall. Every rationalization they offered, taxes, yard work, maintenance, dissolved the moment I asked who had paid those bills for 23 years. Who had pushed the mower at 6:30 mem on summer Saturdays? Who had patched shingles in the rain at 5 summers mem when a storm split the sky? Tyson finally planted both hands on the table and said with brutal ease, "Look, Joy's your only heir. When you die, this house is ours. We're just making that transition cleaner." The temperature in the room dropped. "Is that what you're waiting for?" I asked softly. "For me to die?" Joy flinched. Tyson didn't. He started to reply, then thought better of it and sank back into the couch. Something settled inside me, then calm, heavy, decisive. I said we would stop pretending and start living honestly. "Here are your choices," I told them. "You can stay here under conditions that any reasonable adult would accept, or you can make other arrangements." Joy's mouth trembled. Tyson rolled his eyes, but he listened. I laid it out without raising my voice. Within 30 days, both of you will have jobs, any jobs. You will contribute $400 a month toward household expenses. Starting this month, you will do your share of cleaning, yard work, and repairs, and you will speak to me with basic respect. If any of that is a problem, you are welcome to leave. Tyson scoffed at $400 as if I had suggested $4 million, but I only raised an eyebrow. That is less than half of what this place costs to run. I said, "You've lived rent-free for 5 years. Consider it mercy." I gave them until 4:00 p.m. the next day to decide. That night, I lay awake until 1:30 a.m., not from fear, but from a strange clarity humming under my skin. Through the thin wall, I heard their whispers sharpen into blaming, then soften into bargaining, then die into the weary silence of two people who have run out of excuses. It was almost dawn when I finally slept. At 8:10 a.m., I brewed coffee and waited at the table. They shuffled out at 11:20 a.m., faces puffy with lost sleep. Joy spoke first. "We want to stay," she said, voice steady and small at the same time. Tyson nodded, eyes skittering off mine. "For now," he added, as if the word could shield him from responsibility. "For now is still a beginning," I said. The next days felt like moving furniture in the dark progress measured by bruises you discovered later. Joy attacked job applications with the nervous ferocity of someone who had just located the edge of a cliff. She reworked her resume, circled want ads, and by 9 was dialing numbers I had not realized she knew. In the evenings, she cooked simple meals, the good kind that make a house smell like hope at 6:00 p.m. Chicken baked with rosemary, beans simmered with garlic, rice fluffed in a pot older than she was. She started doing laundry without being asked, folded towels into neat thirds, and even replaced the cracked plastic hamper I had kept out of habit. The house exhaled. Tyson performed industriousness like it was a role in a community play. He refreshed job sites, groaned about pay scales, dressed for interviews at 1:00 p.m., then returned at 3:10 p.m. with stories about incompetent managers and misleading postings. He trimmed the hedges one afternoon, loudly, as if the clippers were a trumpet announcing his sacrifice. He began to say please and thank you. The words wobbled in his mouth like new shoes. I did not reward him for decency. I simply acknowledged it and moved on. A week passed, then 2. Joy came home one Thursday at 5:45 p.m. with eyes shining. "Assistant manager at Matthews Furniture," she said, the paper trembling in her hand. "Full time." "I start Monday." Pride lifted the roof beams. "You did that," I said. "You..." Tyson sulked through her victory like a man watching the weather change against his wishes. "She gets lucky, and I'm stuck," he muttered that night, slumped at the table. "Maybe she got results." I said mildly, "There's a difference." He stared at me, then at the window, where the porch light threw a small island onto the dark. "I took a warehouse shift," he announced 3 days later at 7:20 p.m., as if offering a donation to charity. "Part-time. Nights. Work is work." I said, "Leave the martyrdom at the door." The first $400 arrived late, and in 2 hunks, Joy's crisp bills, Tyson's crumpled ones placed on the table like offerings. I set the money beside the water bill and said nothing. Respect bloomed in small, measurable ways. Joy knocked before entering my room at 9:00 p.m. with a load of folded laundry. Tyson rinsed his plate instead of abandoning it like a fossil. On Saturday at 8:30 a.m., I found him bagging leaves on the lawn, his posture resentful but his hands working. I did not thank him. I nodded and carried my coffee back inside. It wasn't smooth. Tyson backslid, snapped at me twice. Once about cereal, once about the thermostat. The old contempt flashed through his eyes at 10:05 p.m., like heat lightning in summer. I held his stare both times and said only, "Try again." He did. Joy, meanwhile, became someone I recognized and hadn't realized I missed. She told me about the kinds of customers who wander furniture showrooms at 20p. The couples who argue about sofa colors, the widower who bought a sturdy chair because it looked like the one his wife had loved. She left sticky notes on the fridge with groceries she could pick up, times she would be home late, a heart drawn next to my name like the ones she'd made at 8 years old. 3 weeks into this new order, I woke at 6:15, looked out the window, and saw Tyson sitting on the hood of his car, staring at the street as if it contained a map I could not see. By 2:40 p.m., he was packing boxes in the living room. Joy watched from the kitchen doorway, a dish towel twisting in her hands. "What's going on?" I asked. He did not look at me. "Jake's got a couch," he said. "I'm heading there for a while." His tone dared anyone to call it what it was. Joy's voice was quiet but sure. "I'm staying here, if that's okay with you." "Mom?" It was the first time in years she had asked permission for anything and meant it. I nodded. "This is your home, as long as we are behaving like family." Tyson sealed a box with too much tape and carried it to the door. He paused, waiting for outrage that never came. "You win," he muttered. "There was never a game." I said, "There are only adults and the choices they make." He left without saying goodbye. The door clicked shut at 3:05 p.m., and the house changed shape in the silence he left behind. The hours after Tyson drove away felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. The house seemed lighter, as though the walls themselves were grateful for his absence. Joy and I sat on the porch together that evening, the same porch where I used to watch her ride her bike in circles until sunset. At first, neither of us spoke. We just listened to the crickets and the distant hum of cars. Finally, she turned to me, eyes rimmed with red but steady. "I think my marriage has been over for a while," she admitted. I just didn't want to admit it. I reached for her hand, the way I had when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. "Sometimes admitting the truth," I said softly, "is the first step to setting yourself free." In the weeks that followed, the house settled into a rhythm that felt almost new. Joy threw herself into her job, leaving each morning at 8:15 a.m. with a packed lunch and returning in the evenings with stories of cranky customers, difficult deliveries, and the small victories that made her smile. She paid her share of the bills promptly, even slipping me a little extra once when she got a bonus. She helped with chores without being asked, and sometimes I would wake to find the laundry already folded or the floors freshly vacuumed. The transformation was remarkable, not just in what she did, but in who she was becoming. We grew closer again. On Sunday afternoons, she cooked us dinner, and we would eat slowly, lingering at the table to talk about everything and nothing. She asked about my day, about the residents at the nursing home where I still picked up shifts, about the photography class I had signed up for at the community center. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a daughter again, not a tenant who took me for granted. Tyson, meanwhile, was gone like smoke in the wind. I heard through neighbors that he had ended up crashing on a friend's couch, then eventually moved back in with his parents. I didn't miss him, Neither. I suspected. Did Joy? She rarely mentioned his name, except once when she sighed and said, I thought love meant being taken care of. But real love means partnership. He never understood that. I didn't answer. Some lessons only sink in when you say them aloud yourself. 6 months passed, and Joy made a decision that filled me with a quiet pride. She moved into her own apartment across town. Not because I asked her to, but because she wanted to stand on her own. I need to prove to myself that I can do this, she explained as she packed her things. I helped her carry boxes down the porch steps, remembering the day she had moved into my home with Tyson, full of excitement and promises that never came true. This time was different. This time, her steps were steady. The first Sunday after she moved, she invited me over for dinner. Her apartment was small but tidy, with curtains she had picked out herself and photos she had framed of us together. She served pasta and salad, and I nearly cried when she handed me a plate and said, Sit, Mom. Let me take care of you tonight. That became our ritual. Every Sunday, we shared a meal, sometimes at her place, sometimes at mine. We laughed, we talked about her career and my hobbies, and slowly, we rebuilt something stronger than before. My own life began to blossom in ways I had never expected. I joined a book club at the library and found myself debating novels with women my age who became fast friends. I took long walks in the evenings, camera slung over my shoulder, learning to see beauty in small things, a rusted gate, the golden light at 710p, the curve of a neighbor's old oak tree. I even started attending a local photography class where I discovered that capturing moments wasn't so different from living them. Both required patience, perspective, and the courage to frame things in a new way. The house, too, transformed. Without the weight of entitlement pressing down on it, it felt like mine again. I painted the living room a soft cream, replaced the sagging couch Tyson had claimed as his throne, and planted flowers along the walkway. Each brushstroke, each bloom felt like a declaration I am still here, and this life is still mine. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about how differently things could have gone if I had stayed silent, if I had accepted their cruel words and surrendered my home. I might have ended up in some lonely apartment, wondering where everything had gone wrong. Instead, I found a new strength I hadn't known I carried. I had discovered that it's never too late to demand respect, never too late to protect what you've earned, and never too late to remind the people around you and yourself that you are not disposable. One evening, as Joy and I sat on her balcony watching the sun slip behind the city, she leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for standing up to me. Mom, you saved me from a life I didn't even realize was suffocating me." My throat tightened, but I managed a smile. "You saved yourself," I said. "I just reminded you that you could." The house on Maple Street remains mine, not just on paper, but in spirit. It's a home filled with resilience, with lessons carved into its walls, and with the knowledge that love, real love, is built on respect and choice, not entitlement. And as I sip my morning coffee at 6:45, watching sunlight spill across the yard where Joy once played, I know that, for the first time in decades, my future is my own. The seasons turned, and with them, the rhythm of my days settled into something steady and satisfying. Each morning, I woke around 6:30, made myself coffee, and sat by the kitchen window looking out at the yard I had tended for more than 2 decades, without Tyson's clutter or Joy's old arguments hanging in the air. The silence felt peaceful rather than heavy. I found myself smiling at the simple things, the way the light shifted across the floorboards at 9 the sound of birds in the maple tree, the hum of the refrigerator that had once felt lonely but now seemed like a heartbeat. Joy thrived in her new life. She called often, not out of obligation but because she wanted to share. She spoke about her customers, about the challenges of being an assistant manager, about how proud she felt signing her first solo lease. Sometimes she came over after work, kicking off her shoes at 6:15 p.m., like she used to as a teenager. But now, with a grown woman's laughter and a new sense of independence, our Sunday dinners remained sacred. We alternated between my house and hers, cooking for each other and enjoying the simple act of being present. I noticed the change in her most of all. Without Tyson weighing her down, she became lighter, more herself. She asked my advice again, listened without defensiveness, and often surprised me with thoughtful gestures, a bouquet of flowers, a new teapot, because she remembered the handle on mine had cracked, or a framed photo of us together on the porch. Once, at her apartment, she set down her fork mid-dinner and looked me in the eye. "Mom," she said, "I don't know how to make up for everything I said and did before, but I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I see you now." My throat tightened, but I managed to answer. "Then start by being kind to yourself. The rest will follow." As for Tyson, his absence was a blessing neither of us denied. Word trickled through acquaintances that he had drifted from couch to couch, unable to hold down steady work. His name came up less and less, until finally, it didn't come up at all. I did not wish him harm, but I also didn't waste energy on wondering what might become of him. Some people choose to remain stuck, and no amount of sacrifice from others can unstick them. With the weight of those years lifted, I rediscovered parts of myself I had long buried. I joined a photography class at the community center, learning to capture moments with the same care I had once used to preserve our family through hard times. My teacher, a cheerful man in his 70s, showed me how to adjust the lens to catch the subtle light of dawn, and for the first time in years, I felt like a student again, curious, excited, alive. I joined a book club at the library and found myself laughing late into the evening with women who quickly became friends. They marveled at my resilience when I shared a piece of my story, though I always told them the same truth. Strength doesn't come from never being broken. It comes from learning how to stand again. The house itself blossomed too. I painted the living room a soft cream, replaced old furniture, and planted flowers along the walkway, their colors bursting each spring morning like promises kept. Neighbors stopped by to compliment the garden, and sometimes I caught myself standing on the porch at 7 camera in hand, capturing the way the setting sun gilded the petals. The house no longer felt like a battlefield or a burden, it felt like mine, wholly and proudly mine. Looking back, I realized that the turning point had not been when Tyson mocked me or when Joy called me a burden. It was when I decided to answer with strength instead of silence. For too long, I had believed that being a good mother meant enduring, sacrificing, and never demanding anything for myself. But motherhood is not servitude, and love without respect is not love at all. By standing up, I had not only reclaimed my home, but I had also helped Joy reclaim herself. Sometimes I still open the old photo albums, running my fingers over pictures of a younger Joy, grinning with gap-toothed pride, or hugging me at her high school graduation. For years, Those images had felt like reminders of what I had lost. Now they feel like proof of the bond we had rediscovered, a bond tempered by hardship, but made stronger because we chose to rebuild it. The biggest lesson I carry, and the one I hope others hear in my story, is simple but powerful. It is never too late to stand up for yourself. It is never too late to demand respect, even from the people you love most. And it is never too late to take back your life and live it on your own terms. So, if you've listened this far, I hope my story stays with you. If you've ever felt like your sacrifices were invisible, or like the people closest to you treated you as disposable, remember your worth does not depend on their recognition. Your life, your choices, and your dignity belong to you. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If my story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the strength we all carry inside. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a way that changed everything?